All right, welcome in. Today we are here to talk about Treylon Burks, wide receiver on Tennessee. Usually, a player's value, especially one who at the time was considered an elite prospect like Treylon Burks, doesn't fluctuate that much. If anything, if they show any flashes their rookie season, it goes up wildly, drastically. But I'm also going to try to look through this from the lens of not only guys who care about fantasy, but guys who care about the NFL, because there's a difference between the two. And with Treylon Burks, his NFL career has been a roller coaster so far. His value has fluctuated as an asset and a player, and to be honest, I'm not convinced it's for the better. Treylon's rookie season was not a good one. Let's get that out of the way right now. You can blame the situation. You can blame the fact that down to the winner take all game in week 18 in Jacksonville, Tennessee was choosing between Josh Dobbs and Malik Willis. It wasn't pretty. Let's just get that out of the gate. Tennessee was not a good offense last year, especially without Tannehill, and especially comparing the guys who were drafted in front of him, such as London, Wilson, Olave, Dotson, and I guess Jamison Williams' rookie year was even worse, but he gets a pass for his ACL. But you get the picture. Let's not forget, Treylon Burks was the guy who was compared most to A.J. Brown, which, disclaimer, probably at the time was not a great comparison. But it was even, that comparison was made as a prospect, not even as a player. Now, those comps were only amplified when Tennessee traded A.J. Brown to Philadelphia for 18th overall and a third. Embarrassing deal for Tennessee. Just absolutely no other way around it. It ended up getting their GM fired. But Burks also had a tremendous fall from grace in the past year and a half. He went from being almost a borderline slam dunk as the wide receiver one in the class and the 101 in dynasty leagues, whether it was 1QB or Superflex, which, again, not even my opinion, but it was the opinion of many others at the time. And banking on Treylon to fill A.J. Brown's role in Tennessee in year one was always going to be risky, and it just didn't pan out in Tennessee's favor. But we're just going to talk more about this as we get further into the video. Now, people, when they evaluate prospects, usually have an infatuation with guys who are big, fast, and strong, which, yes, that definitely matters for the sport of professional football. But if you aren't refined, you won't be able to use your athletic tools to the best of your ability. And if you can't beat a corner who is just as fast as you are on the outside, especially as a first round wide receiver, Treylon's yak ability was absolutely undeniable at Arkansas. And he did show a lot of flashes his rookie year of that yak ability. But Tennessee was just simply the wrong team for Treylon to go to. While he was projected as a big slot at Arkansas, they put him on the outside. So he was essentially learning a new position his first year in the league. He went off against Green Bay and he showed a lot of promise against Dallas. But his situation was also so bad that, pretty much anything I'm grateful for that he did last year. What I will say is that his efficiency was actually pretty solid, especially considering he was on, I think, the worst passing offense in the league, if not the second worst last year. But he only reached double digit fantasy points in 3 of the 11 games. So if you started him at all, you were definitely not happy with literally anything he did, especially if you took him over London, Olave, and Wilson. And he was given an average cushion of 7 yards per play, which was 6th most in the league. That tells us that defenses were, I guess it means they respected his speed, but they were not scared of him in the slightest. They were not scared of Tennessee's offense in the slightest. And when your only two choices for quarterback in a winner-take-all game were either Josh Dobbs or Malik Willis, it should be considered a resounding success, and we should give Vrabel a lot of props for making Tennessee seem not as hopeless as they actually are, or as much as we think they are. Todd Downing was a horrible offensive coordinator, and now he's coaching the Jets with probably the only offensive coach in football who was even worse than he was last year with Nathaniel Hackett. Tennessee just simply expected too much out of Burks year one. They also expected Kyle Phillips to come in and be an immediate contributor, and he was an absolute training camp monster for Tennessee. I saw a lot of hype about Kyle Phillips. Vrabel said send the two best out there from offense. They did not send out Treylon Burks. They sent out Robert Woods and Kyle Phillips. And then Phillips ended up having that hamstring injury, which made him absolutely disappear. And what I'm wondering is, where was all this hype about Treylon? It's more of a red flag when a guy doesn't get training camp hype at this point, especially considering when we're all wrapped up in the idea of, ooh, shiny rookie, especially one that we've had a full year to evaluate and gloss over and be like, yeah, he's going to be a beast for Dynasty. What made me think of making a video about him was yesterday when an article came out with Burks saying that he was pretty much better conditioning wise than he was the last year. And pretty much every piece of news from last season and last offseason about Burks was overwhelmingly negative. It was an injury riddled year, but you can't really put that on a guy unless the issue is chronic and repeatable. But this is just extremely confusing in particular because there were multiple articles not only detailing that Burks was out of shape, but that he was having asthma problems. And yesterday, there was news that came out saying he was in a much better place. First of all, I'm pumping the brakes on hoping that he can be anywhere close to where we thought he could be at the time of the draft last year in April, May 2023. And it's also not like his allergies or asthma have gone away. And unless he plays in Denver, like Von Miller, who had asthma problems and still ended up being one of the best defensive players of this generation, I don't see how this significantly changes anything. For me to be back in on Burks, it'll have to be more of a show, don't tell kind of thing. So what does this mean for Treylon Burks going forward, and specifically 2023? Well, Tennessee's offense still kind of keeps me scratching my head. Tim Kelly, who was their passing game coordinator, was promoted to offensive coordinator. Now, Tennessee's passing attack, we've already touched on it, not pretty. Didn't strike fear in anyone. But they also hired Charles London from the Atlanta Falcons to be their quarterback coach slash passing game coordinator. Last year, Charles London was the quarterback's coach of the Falcons. Now, I don't know how much fell on him and what specifically his responsibilities were, but Mariota last year was a definitive bottom three quarterback in literally every passing stat. Couldn't get the ball to London or Pitts. Absolute miracle and great run scheming that they were able to win 7 games. I will say, I absolutely hated Ritter as a prospect, but the fact that he showed a little bit of promise gives me a lot of hope for Charles London as their coach. But back to Treylon's outlook, I just don't see this being a high-volume passing offense, and this team just drafted Skoronski and Levis. Levis is probably not a day-one starter, but I imagine he'll get his chance at some point in the year. I'm not big on Levis, but hey, I could be wrong. Now, Treylon is probably in for a year of getting peppered if he stays healthy. Tennessee has probably the worst group of skill players in the league, or at least pass-catching weapons. As far as the guys behind Treylon, I honestly like Phillips and Okonkwo, but those guys are 4th and 5th round picks, so we really shouldn't expect them to amount to much. I can only really see a couple of Henry, Burks, Okonkwo, and Phillips having the opportunity to go off on any given week. It's spoiler alert, it's more often than not going to be Derrick Henry. That's just the way it's always been, probably the way it will be until his wheels fall off. But Treylon was also a sub 25 percentile beater of man, zone, and press last year. And I won't rule out Burks taking that next step, but as of right now, I'm very bearish on him. I'm not really buying any Burks in Dynasty or holding out hope that he can be what he expected. I'm actually trying to sell him if I do own any shares of him, because I do think that he can be a decent, good player for the Tennessee Titans. But this is just such a low volume offense that I will try to get out for anything I possibly can. I also think we may have to wait a while to see Treylon Burks finally get to show the potential that we know that supposedly existed while he was coming out in the draft. Kind of like DJ Moore. I mean, DJ Moore went from one of the worst quarterback situations in the league, perennially Carolina, to a team with the most uncatchable targets in the league last year in Chicago. But DJ Moore is good, and honestly, I don't think that's a part of Treylon Burks' outcomes, because if he can be a DJ Moore at this point, that's an absolute slam dunk. Burks can still win me back. Let me just make that clear. I know that this video has kind of been trying to evaluate both sides of the argument. I'm just not big on Burks right now, but he absolutely can win me back. It will be very, very hard for Tennessee's passing offense to be much worse than what they were last year. But if Treylon Burks can show something, if Treylon Burks can show that if you give him that volume, he can be that guy they drafted him to be when they traded away A.J. Brown, I will be right back in on him, and I will be buying him. But as of right now, between the asthma and the overall Tennessee offense, I just don't see a lot of upside here.